Welcome back again to Joe Stunner Boxing. I want to talk today about greatness, fistic greatness, what constitutes it, and how do you achieve it. Because you get a lot of young fighters nowadays, and I don't want to slip into the mode where, the old guy slags off the new. That's not what this is about. There are great fighters around today. I never liked the idea that things were, better in the good old days, because as my grandfather always used to tell me, there's no such thing as the good old days. There's the good and the bad. So I'm not slagging off modern day fighters, but I'm sort of slagging off the culture, if you like, that exists. Because a lot of young fighters want to be great. Well, of course they do. They want to have their legacy. They want to make a lot of money. But are they prepared to put in the work that those from yesteryear did? Now, an obvious example could be, a more recent example that I'm going to go into a little bit later, is Floyd Mayweather Jr. Because Floyd Mayweather Jr., long before he became money, was Pretty Boy Floyd. In a sense, he had two careers. He had that, super feather lightweight killer who was knocking people out, zapping people like Diego Corrales. I actually picked Diego Corrales to beat Floyd Mayweather because Corrales looked like a real killer at the time, was undefeated. I thought, okay, he's long, he's rangy, he's going to beat Floyd. Floyd made a believer out of me, and then he went on a little rampage and he was fighting, lots of decent contenders and winning belts. And it was only when he got to, the De La Hoya fight, and after that he beat De La Hoya and he became the cash cow. And he is an extremely good, very greedy businessman, but he loves money. And regardless of what you think about him as a person, and don't have a high opinion of him, he was a great fighter. And yes, he cherry picked in that second career people, and he sort of killed the clock on others. But nevertheless, he had put in a lot of work before he got to that point where he was the pay-per-view star, earning tens of millions. Now, you got people nowadays like Tank and Shakur Stevenson, and they are very, very talented fighters. But when Tank beat Ryan Garcia, he was asked after the fight, "Are you the face of boxing?" Of course I am. No, no, you're not, mate. You're not. You're not. Why? Because you beat Ryan Garcia? No. If you want to be truly great, and in fact, if you want to open the door to making millions and millions or tens of millions of dollars, you've got to fight regularly. You've got to fight the best. Now, one person who does that nowadays is Canelo Alvarez. And there's a black mark above Canelo Alvarez because he failed a PED test. But you can't knock him for, fighting consistently and regularly. And because he turned pro at 15 and he hasn't really stopped since then. And you can say, yeah, okay, maybe he swerved the Bivol rematch and you can always find things to nitpick at. But the reason he's a massive star is because he fights regularly. He's got, what has he got, 60 fights, 50 something fights now? I mean, which again, it's kind of old school by today's standards, but if you go way, way back, you got fighters having several hundred fights, Willie Pep and a few others, well, quite a few others actually. But let's have a look at two of the greats who don't go back that far. We're going to go back 40 years, which, considering the gloved era is 130 plus years old, the Queensberry rules and so on. 40 years isn't that much. It's the stuff that I grew up watching. I'm going to take two fighters as an example of two fighters who are considered great, okay, and who don't have spotless records, who lost fights, who got knocked out. But nobody cares. Nobody cares about the so-called O, even though O is a letter, not a fucking number. These are people who fought everyone, and they fought regularly, and they took on the best people, and they became very wealthy. Whether they hung on to the wealth or not is another matter. But they certainly are viewed by boxing fans universally as pretty much two very great fighters, and that's Sugar Ray Leonard and Thomas Hearns. I'm going to concentrate on them rather than Hagler and Duran from the Four Kings, because they had slightly different careers. But let's look at Leonard to start with, okay? Now, Leonard turned pro in February of 1977. Okay, he was an Olympic gold medalist, excuse me, at the 76 Olympics. And he had, I think it was 9 fights in his first year. 9 fights. Turned pro in February. It was early February, so let's say, for the sake of argument, 11 months he had 9 fights. That's pretty good going. By today's standards, I'm comparing it to today's standards. The second year he had 11 fights. 11 fights. And they were against people like Dick Eklund, who you may know as being Mickey Ward's trainer, half-brother and trainer. He was fighting men, had records like, 21-7. Javier Munez, Randy Milton was a decent fighter. I saw him a few times. He also fought Floyd Mayweather Senior, who at the time was 15-1. This is, to bear in mind, this is about 18 months after Leonard turned pro. And, Bernardo Pineda, he was fighting guys like Armando Nunes. These were guys who could take you rounds and you were going to learn your trade. And he was knocking a lot of them out. He was winning a lot on points. But the point is, the second year of his career, he had 11 fights. In the third year of his career, 1979, he had 9 fights. 9. And the 9th of those, which was it would have been towards the end of the year. I think it was about November. I can't remember the exact date, but November, late November, I want to say. But I looked this up before and I can't remember offhand. But he fought a great champion and beat him. He fought Wilfred Benitez. So let's get this straight. In only the third year of his career, he has 8 fights leading up to a fight with Wilfred Benitez. Okay? And by the way, these weren't pushover jobs that he was fighting. I mean, he had Andy Price, who was a decent enough fighter, Pete Ranzani, Tony Ciavrini, I can't remember the guy's name. But these were guys with, Pete Ranzani, for example, had something like 45 wins and 3 or 4 defeats. This was a good fighter. Leonard was working towards, he had 8 fights, working towards a world title fight, a 15-round world title fight with another great fighter, which was Wilfred Benitez, who was proven to be an excellent fighter. And 2-weight world champ, youngest ever world champ at 17, beat Antonio Cervantes, who himself was an extremely good fighter, probably making it to the Hall of Fame. Benitez and Leonard, both in their early 20s. It was for the WBC welterweight title, and Leonard stopped him in the 15th round with about 6 seconds left. So this is, that 1 year alone, 1979 that was, 8 fights against very good, BB minus level fighters, preparing you for a fight against an established champion. Over 15 rounds, you knock him out, okay? And then in 1980, he had a quick one against Dave Boy Green. He then took on, in 2 fights after Benitez, he took on Roberto Duran, who at the time was 71 wins and 1 defeat, and the defeat was avenged twice. Lost, as we know, over 15. Fought Duran at his own game. Okay, Duran's coming up from lightweight, so you can make the argument that he wasn't as big as Leonard. But let's make no mistake, there wasn't a great deal of difference in size. And yeah, Leonard was probably a bit bigger in natural weight. But this is a hell of a fighter to take on. And he lost over 15. And then, do you know what? He won the rematch. It was the old no-mass fight. He then fought Larry Bonds, who was no pushover, a decent enough fighter, good B-level fighter, and stopped him in 10. Again, these are 15-round world title fights. And then what does he do? He jumps up. Bear in mind, this is 1981 now. I mean, by the way, I should point out, 1980 were the 2 Duran fights and the Dave Boy Green fight. So he only had 3, but taking on Duran twice is pretty impressive. The Larry Bonds fight, we're into, I think it was February or March 1981. He beats him, and then he takes on Ayab Kalouli at super welterweight, undefeated Kalouli in 36 fights, knocks him out in 9 rounds, all right? And then he fights, after picking up that belt, who does he fight in 81? September, I think it was? Thomas Hearns, 32 wins, 0 defeats, 0 draws, an absolute killer of a fighter. We all know what happened. Leonard took him on, stopped him in 14 rounds. And And then he came to the end of his, what you might call his first career, because he had Bruce Finch. He stopped him in 3 rounds. Finch was, again, not a bad fighter. And then he had all that time out. I think he fought Kevin Howard, got floored, re-retired, and then, of course, he came back for Marvin Hagler. That was his second career, which was very, very different from his first. But when you consider that between 1977, when he turned pro, and 1981, which was, I mean, we're talking about 4 years and 6 months. He fought Duran twice. He knocked out Benitez. He knocked out Hearns, and he fought other good, B level, B minus, maybe a few B pluses in there fighters. That's in 4.5 years. Incredible record, absolutely incredible, and the amount of fights per year, incredible. So let's go to his sort of his nemesis, Thomas Hearns. Now Hearns had a very similar type of professional start, because he fought. Well, put it this way: he turned pro in 77, but he only had 3 fights. Why? Because he turned pro late in November of 77. And you know what? Even though he was fighting really no-hopers, really, journeyman, he still managed to squeeze in 3 fights in about a month. First month of being a pro. He then went, I think it was either 9 or 11 fights in his next year. And there were a couple of good names there. Bruce Finch was decent. I can't remember the others offhand. I'm not sure if these were in 78, but he was fighting some decent guys like Harold Weston. That might have been later on in his career, 79 maybe. But again, a lot of fights in a lot of years. 11 fights in 79? I think it was. He beat Bruce Curry that year in 3 rounds. Bruce Curry was decent. So he was having lots and lots of fights. I know he beat Sangsak Wangsurin, who was a former champion at a lower weight. He stopped him in 79. That was in 3 rounds. Yeah, I'm doing this from memory, so I'm not so sure. But by the time he got to we got to 1980, he was ready to fight Pipino Cuevas, who was a long time champ at welterweight, considered an absolute killer himself. Pipino Cuevas was a kill or be killed guy. He had 27 wins and 6 defeats when he went into that fight, but he was on a tear up, and he was a dangerous guy, a big banger. And yes, he was dwarfed by the sort of gigantic praying mantis Hearns, but nevertheless, Hearns to wipe him out in just 2 rounds was pretty amazing. And then he went on a little streak. He beat Randy Shields, stopped him in 12. That was a pretty good win, and he worked his way up to Sugar Ray Leonard in 1981, and as we know, he lost that fight. But nevertheless, he prepared for his world title tilt. Probably not as well as Leonard. The quality of the opposition wasn't as good as Leonard, but he still had, a tremendous amount of fights in so short a space of time. And don't forget, he turned pro about 6 months after Leonard, 6, 7, 8 months after Leonard. And he was still, was he 21, 22 when he fought Leonard the first time? I mean, he wasn't very old. And then after Leonard, having lost to Leonard, he came back and he had some good wins. He had Ernie Singletree was his comeback fight. Marcus Geraldo was a journeyman. But even the journeyman, he was wiping out early in 1, 2, 3 rounds. And in 1982, December 1982, he took on Leonard's old foe, which was Wilfred Benitez, and won a majority decision over 15 rounds against a master boxer. When you think about his career, nobody outboxed Thomas Hearns. Nobody, not even Ray Leonard. Leonard had to turn banger to get rid of him. A masterful boxer, Hearns. Then he beat Murray Sutherland, and Fred Hutchins went out in 3, and then of course he took on Hagler. But here's something, I've said this before in videos. When he faced Hagler up at middleweight, which was 2 weights above his first world title fight. Oh, by the way, I should mention that he wiped the floor with Roberto Duran, knocked him out in only 2 rounds. That's Roberto Duran on the floor, and no one ever did that to Duran again. And that kind of got Tommy the Hagler fight. That was for a WBC Super Welter title. So he fights Hagler. Now, I've said this before in videos. He gets done in 3 rounds. Have you ever heard anyone mock Tommy Hearns for getting done in 3 rounds against Marvin Hagler? You haven't, have you? Why? Because that's Marvin Hagler in the other corner, and Tommy Hearns went in there looking to take his head off. He fought Hagler. He tried to knock Hagler out. Not just win, but knock Hagler out. And when you've got, a Jamel Charlo going the distance with being content with his, almost a journeyman's mentality to go the distance with Canelo, this is the difference between someone who dares to be great and someone who simply creates an image, an aura, an illusion of being great by using a lot of flash and dash. And again, I get back to Mayweather. Whatever you think of Mayweather, there was real substance to the guy. It wasn't all just sheen. There was some actual substance there. So, and then of course, after getting flattened by Hagler, what did Tommy do? Came back against the undefeated James Schuler, 22-0, and knocked him flat in a round. That was the type of fighter that Tommy Hearns was. All right. And that was, he took about a year off, nearly a year, 10, 11, 12 months off, but who can blame him after that Hagler fight? And he was still beating up guys like Mark Liddell, Doug DeWitt, beat Dennis Andrews for the light heavyweight title. This was a great fighter, just as Leonard was. And here's, getting back to the original point of this video, if you want to be great, you've got to fight the best. You've got to fight the best. And it will probably be the key to opening the door to earning millions and millions of dollars. So, compare and contrast the old with the new. What do you think? Leave your comments below. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Please do that. And hit the like button as well if you don't mind. But I'm looking forward to reading your comments. The old and the new. Who have you got? What do you think they do you think some of the modern ones deserve it? Maybe you do. No problem. Leave your comments below and I'll read them. Thanks a lot. Bye for now.